community transport app. Thank you very much, Lucy. Always forget that one. So yeah, welcome everybody. My name is Megan. I work for the Centre for Sustainable Energy. We are a national charity based in Bristol, and we are delivering this series of webinars as part, oh, pardon me, that is the wrong thing. Yeah, as part of the the Northwest Community Energy Pathways project. So we've been delivering a series of webinars to showcase learnings and good practice and other project examples around the theme of community energy. And today is our last one in this series before Christmas, and it's all about transport schemes. So we're really excited to showcase two examples of community transport projects. So we've got Charge My Streets, apologies, with us today, and also Silverdale Parish Council to talk about their Community Energy Fund transport projects that they've been working on. So just a couple housekeeping. We'll do a presentation per speaker, and then we'll stop for Q&A. So Eamon will speak for Charge My Street, and then we'll stop for Q&A, and then Liz will speak for Silverdale Parish Council, and we'll stop for Q&A then. If you've got any questions whilst the speakers are speaking, just pop them in the chat, and my colleague Lucy will keep an eye on that. And hopefully we can get to all your questions today. If not, we can take any away and get back to you as a follow-up. Yeah, and quite a small group today, so if you want to put your camera off, that's really nice, and it's a bit more personal, but also totally fine if you'd rather have that off. And we will share all the slides following today's session as well. Okay, so as mentioned, we're just going to jump straight in actually to Charge My Streets and hear from Eamon, and then we'll hear from Liz at Silverdale Parish Council, and we'll do a further resources and wrap up at the end. So yeah, I think without further ado, I'm just going to hand over to you, Eamon, if that's okay.
That's great. Yeah, can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
That's fine. Okay. I've turned my camera off because I find nothing more distracting than looking at myself when I'm speaking and trying to follow slides at the same time. So, next slide, please. There we go. So my name's Eamon Hennessy. I'm the project manager at Charge My Street, and I get involved in all aspects of our operation, from site selection to funding to installation, groundworks, etc. But I'm not an electrician, so please bear that in mind when you are firing questions at me. Electricians speak an entirely different and alien language to the majority of us. But if you do have any electrical questions, I can take those away and find out the answer for you. So in the context of this evening, I'd like to present to you a model, some potential solutions to the issues that communities face around the equity of provision and adequate infrastructure. But it is just that, it's a model, it's an idea, it's something that's scalable, that can be reproduced. It's not just a sales pitch for Charge My Street. And what I'd really like to get across this evening is that EV charging isn't just about charging your car. And I think that's where some local authorities, government departments, and indeed local community groups can sometimes be a little short-sighted. EV chargers have the potential to offer an awful lot more to communities than just being able to charge their vehicles, both in terms of functionality and also community resilience. And that helps sell the idea of by making the offer more attractive through that additional functionality. Next slide, please. So first up, I'll just tell you who Charge My Street are. Some of you may have come across us, some of you may not. So we're a community-led social enterprise. We're set up as a community benefit society, and we are focused on promoting electric vehicle adoption across the UK, with our stated aim being that there's an EV charge point within a 5-minute walk of every household. We were established in 2018 by one of our directors and some of his friends who wanted to move over to an electric vehicle, and recognise the main barrier to adoption was the lack of infrastructure available to charge their cars. So they got their heads together, raised some funds in the community for the installation of 2 charge points in Alston in Cumbria. And from there, we've grown from just those 2 charge points to over 200. mainly in Cumbria and North Lancashire, but we've also got chargers in the northeast, Birmingham, Essex, and various other places dotted around the UK. We are now unofficially the largest charge point operator in Cumbria. As a community benefit society, all profits are reinvested into expanding our network and helping to fund installations wherever it's feasible. We partner with councils, South Lakeland District Council, Cumbria County Council, Cumberland, Westmoreland, and Furness Council, Durham Council, Wigan Council, along with local businesses and other social enterprises, helping to make EV charging more accessible to everyone. And we concentrate our efforts, particularly in rural and underserved areas, as we recognise that those areas often miss out when it comes to infrastructure such as 5G, broadband, public transport, etc. Because a lot of the big players out there may not view investment in these communities as being profitable, and that's where we differ. For us, it's about community resilience rather than simply making as much money as possible. We also work in areas where there's little off-street parking, and therefore there are additional barriers to the adoption of EVs, as not every house has a driveway. And while there are some solutions available, they can be costly, subject to planning issues, and on occasion lead to rather unsavoury neighbourly disputes around parking, which we have come across. It's also worth mentioning as well, we don't just install the chargers, we operate them, we deal with the billing, we provide 24/7 support, we deal with maintenance issues and offer upgrades wherever possible, all for 59p per kilowatt hour. Next slide, please. I'm not going to preach to the converted and probably far more knowledgeable than myself. Depending on the audience, we might go into this in more depth, but I'm just going to be very brief. It's not a presentation about climate science, so we will keep it very brief. But EVs aren't just a cool new trend. They are an essential part of reducing our environmental impact. Traditional vehicles with internal combustion engines are major contributors to air pollution and greenhouse emissions, as we know. And by switching to EVs, we're cutting those emissions and contributing to cleaner air, healthier communities, and a safer climate as well. Next slide, please. Another key benefit is that energy efficiency. EVs are far more efficient than petrol-powered cars, meaning lower energy consumption and reduced operating costs. So that's good news for your wallet and for the environment. So an EV will convert around 60% of the energy from the grid into movement, whereas a conventional car only uses about 20% of the energy from petrol, only converts about 20% to movement. So with every mile that you drive, you're saving energy and you're saving money as well. And it's also worth noting that the maintenance costs of EVs tend to be substantially lower than that of petrol-powered vehicles. On average, annual maintenance for an EV is around 49% lower, with lower associated service costs. And fundamentally, there's less to go wrong with the vehicle. And of course, at the moment, vehicle excise duty, referred to as road tax, is significantly lower as well. Next slide. So the big question, why are charge points crucial for the UK's future? So the government is allegedly committed to reducing carbon emissions. The transition to electric vehicles is accelerating fast, but with that shift comes an enormous challenge. We're going to need between 253,000 and 661,000 new charge points by 2035 to meet the growing demand for EVs. And that's a massive leap from where we are today, with current infrastructure still lacking in a lot of areas. And one of the biggest issues we face, especially in this part of the world, is that unequal distribution of chargers. Urban areas, bigger cities and towns are well on their way. There's a lot of investment flooding into cities and high demand locations. But rural regions and small communities are often overlooked, creating a charging gap. Many rural areas have fewer charge points per capita, leaving EV owners struggling to find accessible and reliable places to charge their vehicles. And for these communities, that shift to electric cars becomes far less convenient and in some cases pretty much impossible. And this is where community-driven initiatives like Charge My Street come in. We focus on bringing charging infrastructure to low demand areas, places that might not attract those large commercial investments, but still need access to EV chargers. And community-owned charge points play a critical role in ensuring that equitable access, particularly in regions where those market-driven solutions may fall short. So by building and managing charge points as a community resource, we empower local residents to participate in the shift towards greener transportation. And that not only helps individual EV owners, but also contributes to the wider effort of decarbonising transport in the UK. Plus, it ensures that those rural and underserved areas aren't left behind in this transition. So in short, the future of EVs, it doesn't rely just on big investments in high demand areas, but on a diverse and widespread charging network that meets the needs of everyone, regardless of where they live. And you've jumped to the next slide, everybody. That's great. Community-owned chargers, we're directly addressing the specific needs of local residents, especially in rural or underserved areas. Large charging networks focus on high traffic areas, leaving small towns, villages and rural communities without the infrastructure they need. And Charge My Street steps in to fill this gap by placing EV chargers in these areas, allowing residents and visitors to access a reliable service. And one of the standout benefits of Charge My Street is the sense of empowerment that they can bring to local residents. They're not imposed, these charges aren't imposed by large corporations. They're community-driven projects where local people have a direct say in the location, in the planning, the placement, the operation of the charges. And that involvement fosters a deeper connection to that infrastructure and a sense of collective responsibility for the success of the project. It's about taking control of the future and ensuring everybody in the community has a role in the shift to greener and more sustainable transport. And by installing these community-owned chargers, local economies can benefit as well. They make villages and towns more accessible, more attractive to EV driving visitors, increasing footfall to local businesses, cafes, shops and pubs. And travellers who can charge their vehicles while visiting or staying overnight are more likely to support those local enterprises, creating a positive ripple effect for the entire community. And by making charge points available in those rural and residential areas, Charge My Street helps reduce range anxiety, which is a major concern for people who are looking to adopt an EV. That concern that they'll run out of power a long way from a charging station. So that supports EV adoption, but reduces carbon emissions, contributing to the fight against climate change. And that community-based nature of these projects encourages, as I said, that sense of ownership and pride in contributing to a more sustainable future. And when residents see the impact of their collective actions, it does foster a stronger sense of community. But beyond the direct benefits of cleaner transport, these charges play a key role in building local resilience as well. Projects like these are often integrated with renewable energy sources, such as solar panels. We're installing just a facility at the moment at Skelton Top in Village Hall near Penrith, where solar power will be charging vehicles during the day. And that creates an energy ecosystem that not just supports electric mobility, but also strengthens the community's ability to manage its own energy needs independently, especially during times of stress on the grid. So in summary, community-owned initiatives like Charge My Street offer more than just a way to charge electric vehicles. They represent a shift in how local communities can take control of their energy future, promote sustainable transport and build a greener economy while fostering pride and engagement in local projects. It's not just about plugging your vehicle in, it's about powering up the community itself. Next slide, please. So how it all works. So at Charge My Street, we've created a unique and sustainable model that not only tackles the growing demand for electric vehicle infrastructure, but also promotes community engagement and ownership. And we'll just break down how that works. So we work closely with local councils, businesses, community organisations to establish these community-owned charging hubs. They're not just any EV charging stations, they are part of that larger mission to make sustainable transport accessible for everyone. And we bring in expertise in site selection, following suggestions from residents and community groups. We carry out the installation, the ongoing management of these charge points, ensuring that that each location is optimally placed to serve local needs. But the real beauty, we think, of Charge My Street is how we fund it. To finance the projects, we raise funds through community share offers. So when you invest in Charge My Street, you're not just supporting the growth of a vital green initiative, you're becoming part of it. So shareholders gain voting rights in Charge My Street, meaning you have a say in how we operate. And in some cases, investors are eligible for 30% tax relief on their investment as well. Plus, as our network grows, there's the potential for shareholders to withdraw their shares with a moderate return on their investment. And our partnerships with councils are absolutely key as well. The revenues generated from high demand urban locations. So, for example, we've got charges in Windermere, Kendal, Ulverston, and Keswick that are really heavily used. And that income can be used to subsidise sites in less profitable rural areas, ensuring that we can bring charging infrastructure to all regions. So we can install a charger, and we have many of them in the back of Beyond in Cumbria. And we know that despite the fact that it's not going to be used as much as one in Kendal, we have that revenue from more commercially viable sites to ensure that we can keep that up and running. But we have a network of volunteers keeping our network running. We're entirely reliant upon the dedicated efforts of what we call our charge point champions. And these are local volunteers who help and monitor the charging hubs. They're boots on the ground, they assist with minor troubleshooting, reporting issues, making sure our sites are up and running smoothly. And their contributions are absolutely invaluable. It helps keep our costs low and make sure that those charges are always available for the community. And we've got about 150 volunteers at the moment across the country. So we're not just about installing EV chargers, we're about building a network of people committed to sustainability, whether it's through financial investment, volunteering, or simply using our charge points. Everyone is playing a role in making this vision a reality. Next slide, please. There are a lot of challenges we face, like with any big change. Some communities aren't yet fully on board, which can make funding tough if we're looking at the community share model, though we do look at other ways of funding them as well. There's a lot of bureaucratic red tape. I'm sure a lot of you are aware when it comes to working with parish councils and village hall committees. It can be a lengthy process. Costs associated with electricity supply can suddenly stick a zero on the end of the costs of installation. And by the nature of what we do encounter issues. 4G in the middle of nowhere, bad enough here in the middle of Kendal, but when you try to install a charge point and you need to communicate it with it in the middle of Alston, you're going to run into problems. Broadband issues, of course, can have a major impact, as we do need to be able to communicate with our chargers 24/7. I am also a local councillor, by the way, so I can get away with that graphic there, hopefully. Next slide. So this is just a quick slide on our impact. We're really proud of the impact that we've had so far. Our network's growing year on year. Usage is growing month on month. And that slide there just shows you the 2-month period this year, from May to July, CO2 saving of 37 tonnes, the equivalent of 203,000 EV miles driven, and 1,454 trees planted. And as I said, that's increasing every month. So we're really proud of that impact that we're having. Yeah. Next slide. So we have some ongoing projects, and these help fund Charge My Street, help fund installations, pay my wages, and hopefully these will be of particular interest to communities. One of the most exciting projects we're involved with at the moment is this rural energy resilience with V2X technology. So that's vehicle to X, can be a building or the grid or whatever. So that allows EVs to not only draw power from the grid, but also send electricity back into the grid, essentially turning a vehicle into a mobile energy storage unit or a mobile battery. And those benefits are potentially huge, from balancing energy demand during peak periods to providing backup power for residents, homes and businesses. For example, over the kind of weekend of weather that we've just had, this kind of technology could be absolutely key in community centres, for example. Vehicle to building systems can reduce energy costs. Vehicle to grid solutions offer flexibility and the stability to local power networks. And we're installing this at the moment. We've installed several sites already, and we're the only company in the country doing this at the moment. So again, it's something that we're really proud of. It's innovative stuff. So we're installing this under this project at 15 sites across Cumbria and the Northeast. And these installations are all at no cost to the communities involved, with every aspect of it at this stage being fully funded. And it's interesting, I mentioned parish councils earlier on. In some instances, we've been giving away sort of 15, 20,000 pounds worth of kit with no commitment, saying we'll just put this in the ground for 6 months, and if you're not happy with it, we'll take it out. And the number of councils who've said no thanks, I'm not interested, is unbelievable. You really, sometimes you can't give it away. And that just goes back to what I said earlier, that there is a real kind of black and white view of what it is an EV charger does. And many people just think you plug your car in and you charge your car up, but there's an awful lot more to it. And there are three main case uses for this type of technology, and I'll just expand on that in the next 3 slides. So next slide, please. So we have vehicle to building to reduce energy bills. So Blackhall Mill here is located on the outskirts of Gateshead. It's a hub for sustainable energy solutions. The community centre features solar panels and a heat pump that power its activities. And it also has a partnership with Derwent Valley Car Club. And we're very keen on developing car clubs. And that car club integrates electric vehicles into the centre's energy system. So during the day, the solar panels generate electricity throughout the day, charging the car club's EVs at a cost of 15p per kilowatt hour. So that not only supports sustainable transport, also stores energy in that vehicle for later use. Then after dark, the centre can take advantage of the stored energy left in those EVs to actually power its building and operate its heat pump. So that's particularly useful during events during the evening, when they're reducing their energy costs by reusing that energy stored in that vehicle. So the hall can purchase energy from the EV at 20p per kilowatt hour and saves them 10p on their standard tariff of 30p per kilowatt hour. And then once the centre's activities wind down, the EVs recharge overnight at 8p per kilowatt hour, ready for another round of usage the next day. So you've got the community centre is benefiting there. It's reducing energy costs. Distribution network operators like Electricity North West have less load on their network and avoid that requirement for strengthening the network. And the car club gets extra revenue from the battery storage as well. Next slide, please. And then we have vehicle to building. And this would have been particularly useful, as I said, over the weekend. So during Storm Arwen, severe weather caused significant damage to overhead power lines, leaving the village of Yelland in Lancashire without any electricity. The DNO, Electricity North West, dispatched engineers to assess and repair the damage, but the workload meant that Yelland faced a 2-day power cut. And using this vehicle to building technology, what we're aiming to do here is we can put the village hall into what's called island mode to ensure the safety of the engineers, making sure they don't get electrocuted. And then Lancaster City Council, with whom we have an arrangement, or indeed other locals who have EVs, can send one of their fleet vehicles to the village, or a local vehicle, as I said, can be used, and that can be connected to the building via a bi-directional charger, restoring power to the community centre and providing energy for local residents. So imagine you've got your power down, there's been a power cut across the village, but residents can come to that community centre, they can stay warm, they can make hot drinks, a cup of tea, a cup of soup, they can charge their phones and transform that space into a crucial community hub during the outage, providing emergency support in response to any prolonged power outage. So local residents are staying safe and warm during prolonged power cuts. Electricity North West are meeting their obligation to ensure vulnerable customers are kept safe, and local authority resilience teams are able to support their local communities through these resilience centres by dispatching their vehicles to help power up the community centre. Next slide, please. Then we've got the vehicle to grid for flexibility. So Skelton Top in Village Hall near Penrith. Innovation will be meeting sustainability. A locally owned vehicle is parked outside, connected to the vehicle to everything chargers. Throughout the day, the EVs have been charging using the excess energy generated from solar panels on the Village Hall's roof, demonstrating a fully renewable energy cycle. By the evening, there could be some cold weather causing high demand on the local electricity network, leading to some constraints in the local area and potentially power cuts. And in response, the Electricity North West requires additional generation to alleviate that strain. And they have an annual budget of £59,000 for the entire region. Which really is peanuts when you consider the number of issues that they have. So alternative cost-efficient solutions are essential, and that's where we come in. So thanks to the software that we can use, we can plug a vehicle in, and that vehicle can actually switch from charging to exporting the energy within the vehicle back into the grid, helping to stabilize the local electricity network during critical periods. So you have your local residents have a more resilient power supply. Electricity North West avoid the need for network reinforcements, and the driver of that vehicle is generating additional revenue from their car battery whilst supporting long-term sustainability. And of course, we get better use of our charge points as well during normally idle times. Next slide, please. This is just briefly. This is one of our other projects ongoing at the moment. It's rather clumsily called SHOUD, which stands for Solar Charging Homes Without Driveways, and that brings solar powered charging to homes. You can plug your car in using solar energy at a community centre. It's reducing electricity costs, reduces the dependence upon the grid while cutting carbon emissions. And that's currently in action at places like Lancaster Boys and Girls Club, Victory Hall in Broughton near Coniston. And it's all about that energy independence, sustainability, and smart use of renewable resources. Next slide, please. And those are just the two installations that I mentioned there at Lancaster Boys and Girls Club and Victory Hall. And drivers who are using that do so at a reduced cost, around about 25% cheaper to charge their vehicles because they're using those renewables. Next slide, please. So that's Charge My Street in a nutshell. I'm not quite sure how long I've been talking for. There's a lot to cover in a relatively short period of time. But happy to take any questions. I've left an event on there which has already happened. I do beg your pardon, but you can join us in making a difference. You can suggest sites to us if you want to become a Charge Point champion, become a shareholder. We do have a share offer open at the moment. We can get details of that on our website. We are always looking out for directors, people to join the board, but really keen for people to spread the word about what it is that we're doing. Yeah, so that's that. I think there's one more slide, which is just a pretty picture, and I can take some questions if need be.
Thank you so much. That was really, really great. I'm just gonna stop sharing so it's a bit better to see everybody's faces. But yeah, it looks like we've got one question in the chat.
Yeah.
What about Adrian asked about e-bike charging stations.
Yeah, it's not something we do, and we don't do it at the moment because there's very little standardization when it comes to the sockets required for charging up bicycles. It is something that we've looked at in the past, and it's something that we are looking at with a local organisation here in Kendal as well as potentially being able to do something, but it's not a core part of our business at the moment.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Please do unmute yourself or pop it in the chat.
I've just put a question in, just
Yeah.
curious about who you use for installations,
I
whether
mean,
you have your own team.
we aim to use local companies, so it depends where exactly where we're installing. But we do have several. We don't have our own team. I'm the only full-time member of staff of Charge My Street. We have two part-time members of staff, and then we have a board of volunteer directors. So we don't have our own electrical team. Uh, but yeah, we wherever possible we use local companies, but we have a core group of 3 or 4 companies that we use.
Oh, there's another question just come through from Nick. Can all EVs push electricity to a building?
With these types of chargers, and as I said, these are quite innovative. Some of these chargers, I think about half a dozen of the ones that we're using have been imported from Japan, because this is quite a big concept in Japan, but not being used in the UK. The rest we've literally built ourselves. With ourselves and one of our partners have built these chargers. And yes, with the bi-directional chargers that we've got, any vehicle can be used.
Um, I've got a question for you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned you've got a share offer open. I'm assuming anyone across the UK can invest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you do when you get a local, when you're developing a local project to get a charging point installed, do you do any sort of campaigning or push to get local people to invest? I was just thinking, it's quite similar to like the big solar co-op model
Yeah.
of anyone can invest, but it's not
Yeah.
directly linked to like a project. It's just
Yeah.
sort of going into that portfolio. It can be quite difficult to engage local people because it's not like it's quite hard to sort of match the investment to the installation.
Yeah, you can make a general investment in Charge My Street, but you also have the option to invest in particular charge points.
Oh, cool.
And on our website, at any given time, there are always some specific charge points that are open to investment for local people to have a look at. And as and when new sites are suggested to us, obviously we have a look at them and see how feasible they are, and we will open up share offers for that particular website. And we always work with communities to ensure that the right information is getting out there to the communities to encourage people to come on board. So it's an either or. You can make a general investment in Charge My Street, or you can make a specific investment in a specific site. And if you've suggested one yourself, we would hope that you would come on board and put a few pounds towards it as well. But that is a big stumbling block. We get a lot of sites suggested by individuals and by community groups, etc. And although there are times when we have a large pot of money and we can literally pay for installations, a lot of the ones in the Lake District were government funded. There does with some of these smaller community ones, we are reliant upon the community has expressed a desire. So we want to work with that community to ensure that we can raise the funding to make it actually happen, because we can't always fully fund them as much as we would like to.
Do you do any sort of not share raising, but just general crowdfunding, like just people offering donations and things like that?
We tend to just do it through share offers at the moment. I think we are bound by certain legislation because of the nature of our organisation when it comes to crowdfunding, which just makes it a little bit more difficult
Yeah,
doing it that way.
yeah.
But it's pretty successful. The share offer we've got open at the moment, it's just been open a couple of weeks. I think we've raised about £30,000, something like that, which will go into reinvesting in the network and just getting some more charge points out there, particularly in relation to the V2X projects that we've got ongoing at the moment, because this project comes to an end in May, and we want to be able to demonstrate how successful it's been, and then go out there into the community and start to install more and more of these, because we think it's the way forward.
Great, thank you. Just calling out for any more questions from anybody? Okay. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, please just pop them in the chat. But I think we'll send the slides, which has your email as well. So if people want to get in touch with you, if that's okay after the webinar.
Absolutely, please do.
Okay, thanks, Eamon. That's really great. Cool. So I think we're going to head on over to our next speaker. So I've got Liz from Silverdale Parish Council. If you're there.
Yeah, here I am. Okay. Yes, I'm a parish councillor. I've been a parish councillor. Can you hear me okay, by the way? Yeah, I've been a parish councillor for about 4 or 5 years, and lived in the village for about 7. So we got some money to fund a sustainable transport study. Next slide, please. So Silverdale, if people attending haven't been here, we're on Morecambe Bay at the border of North Lancashire and Cumbria. We're within the national landscape, Arnside and Silverdale. We're on the Lancashire Coastal Way, the Cumbria Coastal Path, King Charles III England Coast Path is just being finalised down this section. We're on the Bay Cycleway, the Lancashire Cycleway, and the sites of special interest. I mean, they're just everywhere. I think Morecambe Bay itself is covered by about 8 protection protective legislation. We're about 1,500 people, so we're not large, and almost 50% are over 60. So very much people come and live here because they've perhaps been on holiday and they enjoy the walking, and it's a good place to retire to. Not huge, 4.8 square miles is the national landscape. Actually, that might be Silverdale, but anyway, we're half of the national landscape. Next slide, please. We're a community that does reuse, reduce, and recycle, and because the nature of people that live here, we do care for our environment. So we've got the Thrifty Ladies. It's on a rota basis. They donate to charities and to the upkeep of our village institute. They second-hand clothes, get recycled, books, bric-a-brac. The village institute itself is used for musical evenings. I'm going to turn my camera off, actually. I don't like looking at myself. The Film Society, Scouts, other meetings. Were very, very busy community. The Gaskell Hall, again, most Saturdays they sell second-hand clothes, footwear. They're very popular, feature tombolas, raffles. Individual charities book these Saturday slots and regularly raise amounts between £500 and £800 on the day. And recently 2,000 was raised by Bleasdale School in Silverdale, which caters for people and young adults aged 2 to 19 with profound and multiple learning disabilities, or perhaps on the autistic spectrum. We have a volunteer group. The Silverdale Garden Surplus operates May to October, and residents bring excess garden produce, seedlings, jams, cakes to the stall on a Wednesday morning, and other residents take what they need and give what they can. And all the proceeds from that go to the local food banks in Morecambe. This year it raised about £4,500, and I think over the 3 years they've raised nearly £10,000. We have a woodland management, either by National Landscape, National Trust, or the Parish Council, using an army of volunteers. And again, felled wood, unless we deem it better to be left where it is for habitat, it's used within the village and distributed. And we've got litter picks on the shore. We have a lot of visitors, and these are frequently with Silverdale's primary school children. And the school children themselves are taught about the local environment within the curriculum, and they go to forest school with helpers from the National Trust and the National Landscape. And the Parish Council is also talking with Sustainable Arnside about potential joint initiatives. Next slide, please. So the working groups are set up by the Parish Council to tackle specific issues and gain feedback and ideas from other groups. We have a net zero carbon working group, which was formed in 2022, and that comprises a few of the parish councillors, residents, and our city councillor. And we also, which is very important, have a parish council transport and access working group. And that's been going now for maybe 6-7 years. And we have meetings with National Trust, RSPB, Leighton Moss, National Landscape, and Leighton Hall Estates, which is and I put these pictures up of the emergency services and our shore and our bay, because this is why it's so important that we have the transport and access working group, because visitors, we have lots come to the area, particularly during the holiday periods, and we have problems. We have problems with congestion, and this is what happens. People walk out into the bay, the sea comes in very fast, people get stranded, and access is always needed to the shoreline. Next slide, please. Now, in 2022, the Centre for Sustainable Energy recorded carbon emissions in Silverdale per household was higher than the UK average. To help the residents and institutions and businesses of Silverdale achieve net zero carbon emissions, we decided we needed to accumulate and disseminate information about how residents can reduce their carbon emissions, thus saving energy and money, investigate any local source of clean renewable energy that can be used to benefit the community, and identify areas and buildings within the village where carbon emissions could be reduced and renewable energy introduced. As I said, sorry, I've just got a bit away with my notes here. Yeah, so that was the basis of forming the net zero group, looking at these figures. The results showed that there was such a high rate of CO2 emissions, we had to do something about it. I haven't seen the latest data on this, but you can see that a lot of it is to do with transport. Right, okay. So the overall carbon footprint for Silverdale is, I think it's kilograms of CO2 emissions per person, 19,830, which is a lot. Okay, next slide, please. So we found between these two groups, both the Net Zero Carbon Working Group and the Visitor Access Group, we're anticipating problems. We've got increasing visitor numbers. RSPB Leighton Moss at the moment, there's about 100,000 people come every year, and we've got more expected. There's going to be the impact from the opening up of the King Charles III England coastal path of this section of Silverdale and Eden Project Morecambe. We've had articles in the Guardian, the Telegraph, the Sunday Times, hailing Silverdale as the place to come and visit. The population of the village doubles during the holiday months. For over 100 years, it's been a popular holiday spot, but today's long stay visitors come from the Holgate's major caravan park on the border with Cumbria. It has static caravans, mobile caravans and RV pitches, and Gibraltar Farm at the other end of the village, mainly catering for tents, camper vans and RVs. Day visitors are many and include an increasing number of cyclists because of the cycleway. We've got more expected. Now, the minimum we're expecting from Eden Project Morecambe is 5% from the 740,000 a year expected at Morecambe. Now, of the visitors arriving at Leighton Moss, we found that only a tiny minority arrive by train or bus. And I think it was something like 1% or something, which was just ridiculous. No figures were available from the National Landscape or National Trust. They just don't count their visitors. Silverdale Station is a mile from the village centre, but it is adjacent to RSPB Leighton Moss. But it's unfortunate because that mile is difficult for residents and visitors coming into the village. We've got poorly coordinated transport system. There's an unreliable train service, and using the car is the only option for visitors or residents. The train service is unreliable. It's in the bottom 10% of the performance tables for the UK. The Furness line links Lancaster with Carlisle via the west coast, Barrow Furness, Seascale, Whitehaven to Carlisle. Most people, to catch a mainline train south or north, will drive to Lancaster and park there, as the Furness line trains are often cancelled at the last minute or they're late. Also, apart from the Furness line, no cross-border transport exists between Lancashire and Cumbria without travelling to Carnforth. So using the car is the only option for visitors and residents, and most of the residents need to travel to Carnforth, Milnthorpe or Arnside for GP appointments. And those that aren't familiar, Milnthorpe and Arnside are in Cumbria. So the bus is larger than necessary, is a larger than necessary diesel. It doesn't run to the places or at the times that people want, or it is convenient. It trundles around empty a lot of the time. However, the weekly bus to Morecambe that calls through Silverdale is well supported. People used to be able to get a bus to Kendal from Silverdale, but it was axed many years ago. This leads to social exclusion. We've got many elderly and disabled residents who cannot drive, can only use the bus or rely on friends for lifts or the voluntary driver scheme that we have in the village to get to health appointments or to go shopping. We've got a lack of capacity in parking for current visitor numbers and residents, and this causes obstruction and damage. If you think back to the slide I was showing you about the fire service being stuck at the entrance to the shore, and there was I think there were 9 people stuck on the sandbank in the middle of the bay. It can be quite dangerous. We've got little off-street parking within the village centre or at the station. Parish councils had some success in persuading the county highways to extend the no parking area at the entrance now to the shore, because of those the danger of the sands and the parked cars. But the village centre gets very congested, but the police are very helpful in dealing with vehicles that are parked dangerously. And we do have direct contact with named rural officers and the local sergeant, which is really helpful. There's no safe pedestrian route from the village to the railway. It's the lane from the station to the village and vice versa has no pavements. It's an unlit, narrow road with a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit, 30 then 20 as you enter the village, and has hidden dips and blind bends. There have been very many near misses with pedestrians and cyclists not being noticed by vehicles travelling at speed, and most people will not risk the walk. A lot of paths entail crossing the lanes and using stiles and gates that you put the user directly on the roadway, and I'm talking about the many paths that go through the National Landscape area. They say there's a path through Silverdale and the National Landscape for every day of the year. That's 365. On the stretch of road to the station, the Lancashire Way, the Northern Loop, traverses that road. And this is a long-standing, 20 years ago, long-distance path, generally designed to stick to off-road where feasible. The fact it can't get to Silverdale without traversing a dangerous junction on an unrestricted road is noteworthy. Currently, National Landscape is running an Access for All campaign to provide resting places and wider, easier gateways so the less able can access the countryside, and we could see more wheelchair users on those lanes. Low capacity electricity supply from the national grid to the village. This is a real sticking point. This is one of the key barriers that affects household take-up of solar panels, heat pumps and use of EVs, and the village is prone to power cuts during bad weather. I think it was last year, the village was left without power for 4 days. We've got little mobile signal in Silverdale. Smart meters don't work. Owners of EVs can't access cheap rate electricity at night, and most people rely on Wi-Fi calling. It's a crucial issue. At the moment, the village is fighting opposition by Lancaster City Council planners to the siting of a mast that would give the whole village mobile phone signal coverage. That's 4G. It's taken over 8 years to persuade the powers that be that Silverdale needs a working mobile telephone signal, so that the parish council is working with the network engineers to overcome objections at the moment. Right, next slide, please. So with all those issues, the two groups, particularly the access group, came up with the fact that we have to make it easy to ditch the car. We need to provide transport for residents and visitors to and from the railway station and encourage travel to Silverdale by train. We need transport for visitors and residents around the National Landscape area and across the border into Cumbria, that's Milthorpe and Arnside. We need safer pedestrian and cycle routes, particularly from the railway station to the village, a lower speed limit along these routes, because in part it's 60 miles an hour and it's a good part of it as well. We need to find sites for off-street parking and find sites for EV charging points, because there's an increasing visitor use of EVs, but there's no facilities in Silverdale to charge vehicles. Next slide, please. So we set about finding friends. So we had an introduction to the climate change team at Lancaster City Council, and they provided us with new leads. The team is very enthusiastic and willing to share leads for funding with the parish council. They agreed that Silverdale needed help in encouraging residents and visitors to use public transport. With the lack of available hard evidence about potential future use, they supported the idea of getting funding and investment for some form of transport, but it was quickly realised that the lack of infrastructure meant that we could only propose a small community-run bus, and this would be too costly, and it was felt we would not recruit enough volunteer drivers. But we still decided to pitch our case for an electric shuttle bus to serve the village as a Department for Transport Rural Transport Accelerator programme online in February, which was supporting new ideas and technology to solve transport problems in the rural areas. As I said, the bid was supported by Lancaster City Council, not successful, but presenting at the conference did generate new contacts, including Transport for the North, which was very good. Next slide, please. Right, the challenges that we then encountered, we've encountered along the way, really started at a meeting that we had with Lancashire County Council, which was February this year. The Cabinet Member for Highways, Rupert Swarbrick, came to Silverdale with officers with responsibility for EV charging rollout, buses and highways. So this was, say, Lancashire County. The parish councillors were supported by the Lancaster City Council's climate change team, the neighbouring parish council chair, that's from the Yellens, and Silverdale's Lancaster City Councillor. And this is the outcome. We were told the electricity supply to the village will not support any EV chargers. No rollout to the village was envisaged. We were right at the bottom of the list, so that was a no-no. The route from the village to the station, they reckoned was not used by many pedestrians, even though we explained that it wasn't used because the route was too dangerous. They said the speed limit, there was no fatalities on the unlit 60-mile-an-hour lanes, so it didn't meet the strict criteria for the lower speed limit or for establishing a lower speed limit. Well, there have been fatalities, but not within the previous 5 years, and that is the County Council's cut-off point for reference. But the criteria are guidelines and not mandatory, so we need to keep enforcing as a parish council that with the highways and the County Council, they don't have to, it's just guidelines. The current bus service, they said, was expensive and underused. We explained this was because the bus did not go where people wanted to go, and at the time they wanted to travel. The timetable did not allow it to take people to the station to take the train onwards or meet people disembarking at Silverdale Station. And they said the current train service was, well, we explained this train service was unreliable and underused. So again, that's because there's no off-street parking at the station. People cannot get to the station to take a train onwards. They can't rely on the train arriving on time or even at all. So there's no bus service weekdays after 7:30 p.m. There's a reduced service at Saturdays, and there's no service on a Sunday. Both of the local authorities needed hard evidence of need, and we were not open to acting on anything. They weren't open to acting on anything requested by us as a parish council. We realised we needed an independent transport consultancy report to gather this hard evidence and present scenarios of what could be done to improve the situation. Next slide, please. So we had a little progress from that meeting. The county council did agree to look at the current bus timetable, and in fact, hooray, we have a revised one coming into effect on the 16th of December to coincide with the new train timetable sometimes. Not always, just sometimes. Right, next slide, please. Meanwhile, with the help of the climate change team, we put in an expression of interest for stage 1 funding to the Northwest Net Zero Hub on the 4th of January. The project to be a Silverdale Sustainable Transport Study to investigate how to provide an effective transport link connecting Silverdale Station and RSPB Leighton Moss with the village and other destinations with the national landscape. The project involved building a case for this link, but in our expression of interest, we explained that the current service did not meet residents or visitor needs, resulting in an over-reliance on private transport. The new solution, and this is where I wasn't sure this was going to work, because to me, the Energy Fund was about charges, carbon emissions, but actually the new solution to this transport problem could reduce carbon emissions by replacing the current diesel bus service with an electric vehicle and reducing private car travel within the diverse Silverdale area by allowing villagers to use public transport, thus reaching local services and amenities and the rail network. Next slide, please. The potential benefits of the company we explained would be many. It would enhance employment possibilities and opportunities in and out of the village. It would improve access to healthcare. As I said, people have got to go into Cumbria, into Lancaster, even to Preston, and those without private transport are penalised. More secondary school pupils would be able to use the rail network safely, and hardly any actually walk from the station to the village or vice versa, because this road is so dangerous and the current bus service doesn't meet the trains. And families and individuals who do not own a car will enjoy the full benefits of our society and its services, and there'll be less social exclusion. Next slide, please. We had more challenges after this expression of interest. We received an email from the Northwest Net Zero Hub offering help with a second round of CEF funding, or with a round of CEF funding. It wasn't very explicit, and we just thought our expression of interest hadn't cut the mustard. So there was a misunderstanding and a bit of a time delay with us suddenly realising that we were actually being invited to put a full application in for stage 1 funding. The March to April was the application for the study. We found 2 consultancy firms willing to work with us, but we didn't know how to brief them. So how do you get a quote for work when you don't know what you're asking for? We were very lucky. One who is very familiar with our area produced a comprehensive proposal and quotation for the work, which was very structured and disciplined. And thank goodness they knew what they were quoting for, even though we didn't. Next slide, please. The bid went in. both working groups realised that the railway station could provide a transport hub as a base for operations, including e-bike rental, EV charging points for visitors, and possibly a small bus to supplement the 51 bus service. That's the existing bus service that runs here. So the consultant was asked to assess a range of energy efficient public passenger transport options linking the village with the station, but the options were to centre on the use of ultra low emission vehicles or electric vehicles. The idea was to reduce private car travel in accessing local services and amenities plus the rail network, improve the access to healthcare, as I said, be attractive to the growing number of visitor numbers, which is important. And these options will be based on the use of electric vehicles. So this is what we asked them to look at: an electric community minibus filling the gaps in the current service, a dial-a-ride minibus or EV taxi service, making use of the Lancashire County Council travel care minibuses between and possibly after they're used for taking the children to and from Bleasdale School. These are the special school, the children with disabilities. Because, I mean, basically they drop the children at 9 and they're not doing anything until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. An EV car club as an extension to the Co-Wheels Lancaster District Car Club. A separate EV community-owned vehicle available to residents and visitors for booking journeys to and from the station and other locations. And to look at the availability of electric bikes and trampers for hire at the station and the RSPB Visitor Centre. A more detailed feasibility study was to be commissioned in CEF Stage 2 with a business case for the most favoured approach. The favoured service will be managed by a new legal entity under community control. One thing I think government agencies don't appreciate, though, is that parish councillors of a certain age aren't necessarily au fait with new software. Even Excel, to me, is a challenge. The DocuSign grant agreement from the County Council was very nearly ditched as spam, not only by me, but as well as the parish clerk. So that's how desperate we are. Next slide, please. So why is this project innovative? It tackles the problem of public transport in not just a rural area, but the one that is designated as a protected national landscape. And the transport solution must consider many planning, infrastructure and development restrictions, the protection of ecology, flora and fauna, climate change and reducing carbon emissions. But most importantly, the project will provide valuable evidence to infrastructure and utility providers and government in assessing the value of their investment within rural communities and the likelihood of such communities in achieving net zero. And I think that is really, it mirrors what Eamon was saying in his presentation. It's infrastructure. Next slide, please. Right, it was July, late July, summer holidays, it's all systems go. We got the notification, we received the grant on the 11th of July. We prepared the ground with our consultants as their proposal and costs had to be submitted with the application form in May. And we were asked for some supplementary information, and that was submitted by the end of June. So we were lucky, as I say, the consultants were very experienced in this work. They hit the ground running. We gave them a list of stakeholders, organisations and business to interview. We had fortnightly meetings online with the consultants for updates. The claim form, anticipating the timeline, was difficult. I anticipated the work being completed mid-November. That's to allow an analysis of a community survey. In fact, we're having a public meeting in January where they're going to present findings. So probably, excuse me, probably my naivety, not having been involved in something like this before, steering group, I should say, but we've managed to do it, which is the main thing. Task Note 1, they reported back with a baseline report. That was completed, and that covered what transport and mobility options were currently in place and how they were performing. and also what was the geographical and demographic context that impacted on transport and access within or to Silverdale. We launched an online and paper-based transport survey amongst the community. It launched on the 28th of September. We publicised it in the parish mag, which goes to 3/4 of the households in Silverdale, village Facebook pages, which we have a lot of followers, posters and flyers, and it closed on the 1st of November. Task Note 2, the stakeholder engagement and community survey completed. This was based on one-to-one engagement with 23 key stakeholders and a large-scale survey of transport and mobility needs within the Silverdale Parish. We actually had 283 responses, and most were over 60 years old. Task Note 3, the options report, was completed. This set out a range of actions the Parish Council could consider in progressing to improve transport and access arrangements for people, for residents or for visitors. The timing was tight, but the consultants managed to deliver the final report so councillors could decide to accept them. This was in the December meeting just gone, and agree the preferred options to carry forward, and agree for a public meeting to be held in January where the work could be presented to residents. The Parish Council agreed the options to be presented to the community, and if agreed, carried forward to a stage 2 application, which was funding for viability and to create the business case. The Parish Council needs its stakeholder organisations and the community's agreement for it to pursue one or more of the preferred options before applying for stage 2 funding. So because we haven't been able to meet the timing for the stage 2 application, we have asked for an extension for late February, March to take into account the views of people at the public meeting, but we will have to see if there's any funding still left at that point. Next slide, please. So these were the preferred options that we picked up from the options report. Install EV fast charging facilities at visitor venues. So we need to help protect our local visitor economy by equipping businesses and attractions with the necessary EV fast charging infrastructure. Now, more and more visitors are coming with electric cars, but there's nowhere to charge them. So they need charging points at their destinations. The main attractions, you can see, I've got those listed. One of the recommendations we need to follow up is a formal inquiry to Electricity North West for the feasibility of connection. And they've suggested, in partnership with RSPB Leighton Moss, to apply for, I think it's a 340 volt cable to go into the car park at Leighton Moss, which would then, by looking at that, would really tell us what the capacity issues are. At the moment, we're getting various messages. Our MP got a letter that contradicted a letter that we had, and vice versa. So investigate council funding from Lancashire County Council and City Council, and find a delivery partner to help with technical questions. Our fallback position would have to be install standard speed charging points, which really is not brilliant because visitors coming to the area need fast charging. Next slide, please. So the option 2 is a registered taxi bus service. This would potentially fill the gaps with the 51 bus service. It would provide transportation between the station and the village after 8 o'clock in the evening and at weekends, but also where the proposed new service does not provide an adequate connection to certain trains during the day. Taxi bus service would be by tendered contract between a registered taxi or private hire car operator and the Parish Council or Lancashire County Council. It would be a liveried 8-passenger minibus with wheelchair capacity, and the consultants reckon this would cost about £65,000. It could offer an on-demand service to divert the route or provide a separate journey. People could telephone and book when and where they needed to go. A backup vehicle would be needed, but it wouldn't have to be an EV, but would also need wheelchair capacity. And we envisage this bus service, this taxi service, not to venture too far outside the Silverdale boundaries. the priority route being between the village and the station, and the flat fare no more than a 50-51 bus, which I think is capped at the moment. I think it might be £2 or £3. Next slide, please. Oh, yes, on the last slide also, just to say that we've been advised to ask Lancashire County Council to provide finance through its bus service improvement plan funding and to look for a repeat of the Department for Transport's Rural Transport Fund or equivalent. So anybody watching this and you're in a similar position to us, that's what the advice that we've been given. Option 3 was good timing. Westmoreland and Furness Council are already tendering for this service for 6 days a week. But if it falls by the wayside, approach Lancashire County Council to provide one of the weekday Bleasdale School minibuses operated by Travelcare to provide the service 1 or more times a week during the school day when the bus is not needed. And it could also stop at Arnside and Milnthorpe for those health appointments, or I mean, Arnside's nice to visit anyway. Next slide, please. This is the last option, option 4 that we were looking at, the tourist hopper bus service. Now this would transport visitors from the station to destinations in and around the national landscape. And the edge of the route could include Levens Hall, Sizer Castle and Leighton Hall. Leighton Hall's important because it's very much an isolated place, but one that many visitors do want to go and visit, and again the walks link up with the national landscape. It would be seasonal or weekend service. It possibly could attract sponsorship and funding from local organisations, authorities and attractions, and we thought of maybe even a car or van dealership, a local one, might be willing to sponsor it, you know, with branding. Electric minibus subject to viability and overcoming the charging problem. So those were the 4 options. So next slide, please. We've also, while we're progressing those, we've got to discuss with Lancaster City Council a council-led parking strategy for Silverdale. We've got to keep the pressure on and monitor Northern Rail and its performance. We've got to keep supporting improvements to station facilities because those have been run down over the years, but we've got the only original waiting room for on the Furness line, you know, the original one when it was built in about 1850, and that's been renovated with help from Northern Rail at the moment. We've got to find short-term solutions for walking between the village and the station. Now this slide I'm showing you because if you don't go down the dangerous road, you've got to go down to a place called Burton Well. You've got to cross over this little wooden walkway, which is over a dike, sort of a little beck. And this meadow is frequently flooded and it can be up to your knees to get to the other side, to go up then. I think there's about 50 very, very steep steps to get, and then you've got to go over a golf course to get to the station. And we've got to work with Morecambe Bay Partnership and others to supply e-bikes in Silverdale. Most important, all improvements in the bus and train services to increase trust and awareness and passenger use must be marketed, they must be publicised. And that's where our visitor access group comes in as well, because between us all, and involving Northern Rail and involving the county councils, if we work together on a concerted and integrated campaign, and that's Eden Project Morecambe as well, because of this anticipated visitor bleed, then we can get the improvements done. It could be the world's best kept secret if we don't market it and publicise it. Next slide, please. Finally, thank you to all these people. You can see Department of Energy, Northwest Sierra Hub, the CEF team, county councils, their teams, the Centre for Sustainable Energy CEF team, National Trust, all our friends there. Our MP, Lizzie Collins, has been amazing. Philippa Williamson is our county councillor and leader of the Lancashire County Council. She's been amazing, as has Alan Greenwell. my fellow councillors, and in particular Keith Reid and Terry Bond, who are steering this on our working group, our consultants, and next slide please, Northern Rail, who have just sent the Parish Council a letter explaining how they're trying to improve the rail service. So that's about it. I hope it wasn't too rattled through and you got the gist of how we started and where we are.
Thank you so much. That was such a great and thorough walk through your entire journey. I really know it was really, really good to hear, and probably a similar case to lots of other rural areas in the country. So really great to hear about that. Eamon's actually popped something in the chat. Eamon, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yeah, I forgot what was the question. Yeah, you mentioned when you were talking about the connection that rather than fast charging, you'd have to your fallback position would be standard charging, and I'm just wondering how that's being measured. Is it in terms of how long it would take someone to charge?
Yes, it is really, because of the capacity. This is how I understand it, and like you, Eamon, I am no electrician, and I'm not a technical person at all. Because of the even if we raise the capacity within the village, the fast charging is needed for people who are coming, say, for 3 hours, a 2-hour walk, maybe just wanting to visit the middle of the village to go or the shore, you know, maybe for an hour. You know, it's got to be a solution where we can offer fast charging, because otherwise we might have, I don't know how many charging points does Yelland have?
2.
2, right. Well, imagine if the same cars were taking those up all day and nobody else could, you know, given the amount of visitors that we have. Yelland is a like a drive-through village. The residents obviously need facilities, but Silverdale is a destination. It has a visitor economy, and that's the difference, I think. Yeah.
So it would be people visiting who need to recharge their vehicles in a couple of hours. And do you have any sort of stats on how far people are traveling, having visited Silverdale for 2 or 3 hours? How far are they then traveling to their final destination or traveling home? Because that would be an indication as to whether your standard charging would be adequate or not.
Right. It depends. Most weekends we have people who come from East Lancashire, Blackburn, Burnley, people from a lot of people from Lancaster. You know, there are local people from Kendal. But if we have events, for instance, the art trail that we have at the end of June, we've asked people for postcodes, and they come from the West Midlands. They come from lots of places. People come from Yorkshire. They come from Northumberland. You know, they come from all over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I put at the bottom of my question that, you know, and I've said before, happy to have a chat to you. We have regular conversations with Electricity North West. Obviously, we have regular conversations with various councils. We're Westmoreland and Furness here, but we also work. We've been doing some work with Sustainable Arnside as well, which is a group that you mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, so happy to get our heads together. It sounds like there are lots of pieces of the puzzle, aren't there, that you need to, and each piece of the puzzle is a vital piece of that puzzle in order to get it all joined up.
I think what government doesn't understand when they look at rural issues is they're all connected. I mean, the battle we're having with the mobile mast, as I say, we've been without. Most people, like myself, rely on Wi-Fi for communication. If we have an electricity cut, nobody can communicate with each other. Landlines are being switched off next year. So it's vital we get a mast. We've also, as you say, if we want EV charging points, they need to talk to people. And it just seems crazy that so the mobile thing, the electricity infrastructure, the train reliability, all that, it's all connected. There's a fourth thing, I can't remember what it is at the moment. But you can't look at something in isolation. If you're going to look at rural issues, you've got to look at the whole thing and what's the investment. Are you just going to throw people, on the rubbish heap because they live in the countryside? Oh yes, people envy us because we live in the countryside and it's such a beautiful place. But if people can't work here, if the economy can't keep going, because people can't get to work, people can't get out to work. Was it the same local hero, that chap? You can't eat scenery,
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Liz? Yeah, go for it.
Hiya. I feel like I've spoken with you, Elizabeth, on another webinar, one of these,
Probably.
probably. But yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I have a bit of a concern if you were to be using the travel care buses. I mean, I've seen them, I should explain. I live in Rossendale, so yes, I know them. And the problem with putting them into general use would be, well, the elderly. And I deal with a lot of elderly people as part of outreach. And these buses have steps when you open the doors. Yes, you've got the disabled wheelchair lift, but they are quite slow. It's one at a time, please. And the other concern would be that if, say, the more right-leaning elements in our government, I have to be independent here. Yeah, we know this. We know the score. But if they see that you're using such buses, they'll go, "Oh well, you've got a minibus service. You don't need anything else."
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
and
There's a real fear in the village that if we take things too far, that we're going to lose our existing bus service. So it's a balancing act.
it is.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, Transdev. I know I shouldn't be mentioning. Well, anyway, probably get into trouble with that later. Anyway, they're using a Mercedes Sprinter Strata Mela small bus for the more rural services. I've ridden on these particular buses. It'd be far more applicable. Of course, they are diesel. That is an issue, potentially. The other solution, and I cannot remember the exact make and model now, but in Guildford, since about 2019, they've been running small electric single-decker buses. I've ridden on those as well, and more than suitable, very reliable. Absolutely. But I would also, just for everybody, and I am going to shut up in a moment, honest. Currently, Greater Manchester has the BYD double-decker electric buses. They look very good on the outside. The electric traction's fantastic. The seating experience, not so much. For priority seats on the lower deck, they have been retrofitted now with additional seating, but it's
Yeah.
so the thing is, it's the experience, and now.
Well, I'll just say about the electric bus. Obviously, the whole point of this is to reduce our carbon emissions in the village and the surrounding area, and protect the environment. When we broached Lancashire about the bus that trundles around at the moment, which is diesel,
Yeah,
it's big. It's a big, full-size, single-decker bus. They said, well, you've got one of the oldest buses because we can't afford anything else. Yeah.
yeah.
And an electric bus, if we ask them for a small electric bus, where's it going to be charged?
Yeah, I mean, they'd have to get, well, it depends on where this, I suspect that single decker you've got is probably an old Volvo B7. Sorry, nerd alert.
Are you a transport geek?
Have you noticed? Yeah, a little bit. I was at the Manchester Museum of Transport the other day. Anyway, but yeah, so that's what it probably sounds like, probably a cascaded model from the other areas. What was I going to say? Oh, that was it. I was on another webinar talking about the electrification of depots. And most of these battery electric buses, the single deckers, tend to have a range of 150 miles, which probably will be more than sufficient for everyday use. But really, it would be installing some kind of charging infrastructure. I realize that having more electricity into the village isn't a thing at the moment. But the depots tend to have solar panels and stuff like that. So
yeah, I think the key really is we have to encourage people to come by public transport, but then
Yes.
the solution has to get them out from the hub, which we see as the station and RSPB. Now, with RSPB Leighton Moss and Leighton Hall Estates that owns that land, is very supportive of us doing that, but it's going to take a while. Now, luckily, Eden Project North has been set back a little bit to 2028. So we've got a bit more time because we thought it was going to be opening next year. So we've got enough time to put our ducks in a row, you could say, and get the information from Electricity Northwest. And the other thing is the geology of this area when it comes to EV charging points, because we've got a few valleys, which are a bit boggy, but most of the village is built on limestone. And there is a possibility, because where our RSPB Leighton Moss and the station are is more low-lying, and I've been tasked with researching microgrids, which could be perhaps put in some parts of the village to sustain not just EV charging, but also some of the heat solutions that we're looking at. So it's huge and it's very complicated, but my whole message to government and the local authorities is please don't look at one issue in isolation, because you've got to get everything pulling together.
Yeah, we're having similar discussions here in Rossendale, so yeah, I'll leave it there. I'll put in a message about something else.
Nice to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
And seems like you should connect. Sounds like you've got a lot of knowledge, Daniel, about buses, which is great. Okay, so I'm going to wrap things up now. So just really quickly, if you're interested in exploring community energy and also transport projects specifically, I've popped a few further resources there on the slides. So Sustrans is a good resource, the Community Transport Association, a case study from a community energy group in Wiltshire who set up a electric vehicle car club. Might be worth exploring. And there's also, for those who have community transport projects and want to sort of showcase the social value of that, there is a toolkit that was launched earlier in the year for that. And just a link to the Northwest Net Zero Hub to keep an eye out on any sort of future funding opportunities if you were interested in exploring this and getting some funding for that. So I'll stop there. Thank you all for your time. And my colleague Lucy, Eamon said, Nada have our chargers. That's a nice full circle moment. Yeah. So yeah, Lucy's popped a survey link to provide some feedback in the chat, and we'll also follow up with an email with that as well. But yeah, thank you very much for your time this evening, and thank you to Liz and Eamon as well for your lovely presentations. So take care and enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.